Notre Dame is gearing up for one of the most crucial stretches of the entire offseason, and it all centers on the transfer portal. Coming up, we're breaking down Notre Dame's biggest needs in the portal to build a championship caliber roster in 2026.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, and welcome in to Locked On Irish, your daily home for Notre Dame football. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports podcast network, all thanks to your support. I'm Tyler Wojciak, and I'm your host. I graduated from Notre Dame. Now I'm a producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish since 2020. Thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day here on Wednesday, December 31st. I hope everyone has a safe and happy new year. And if you're new here, please subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. It is the easiest way to support the show and make sure you never miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. All right, now that Notre Dame has finalized Marcus Freeman's contract extension, the focus shifts to maximizing the transfer portal, which officially opens up this Friday, January 2nd. The NCAA has moved to a single shortened portal window from January 2nd through January 16th, with exceptions from January 20th through the 24th for players in the college football playoff. There is no spring portal window anymore, so these next few weeks are absolutely crucial. Today, we are diving into Notre Dame's biggest needs as the Irish look to enhance their roster and go all in on a national championship run in 2026. I have ranked Notre Dame's biggest needs in order of importance, and for every position we discuss, even the ones at the bottom of the list, I believe it's necessary to add at least one player for each spot. I'm going to break down who's leaving, who's returning, how many players I think Notre Dame should bring in at that position, why it's a need, and potential targets where applicable. I've also split the position groups into 3 tiers. The non-negotiables to start things out, which include positions Notre Dame absolutely has to address to avoid a major drop-off. Then there's the good to great tier, where the Irish are already in pretty solid shape, but a portal addition or two could raise the ceiling. And the safety net tier, where you're really just looking to add for insurance. But let's begin with the non-negotiables. Notre Dame's biggest need in the transfer portal is the exact same as it was last year. It's defensive tackle. And honestly, I think they need 2, potentially even 3, because this is who is out the door. Gabriel Rubio is out of eligibility. Jared Dawson is out of eligibility. Donovan Heinisch medically retired on Monday. This was a surprise to a lot of Notre Dame fans, but when you consider the injury history that he has had, not just with concussions, but he's also been dealing with a pretty serious shoulder injury over the years, this did not come as a surprise for the staff. So it's a really unfortunate loss because he's a captain, he's a good player, but Notre Dame is going to be without him next season. They might be without Jason Onye. Onye is technically out of eligibility, but he did leave the team for personal reasons in 2024, and Notre Dame is working hard to grant him a waiver to play again in 2026. And then you're probably going to see guys like Brennan Vernon and other guys at the bottom of the depth chart enter the transfer portal here in the coming days. They have not announced a decision at this point in time. We're recording here on Tuesday night, but I expect some more attrition there. So who's coming back? Hopefully, Jason Onye, but then after him, it's Elijah Hughes, Armel Mukam, Sean Sevillano Jr., Cole Mullins, and Christopher Burgess Jr., who was actually recruited as an edge rusher, but I believe they plan on moving him inside permanently. And then, of course, you're bringing in 2 freshmen, Elijah Golden and Tiki Hola. At this point, Notre Dame could be without their top 4 defensive tackles from last season if they're not able to get Onye cleared by the NCAA. It wasn't a strength of the team last year. It was pretty good, but it is a glaring weakness as it is currently constructed. And defensive tackle is one of the most important positions on the field. Look at the best teams in college football the past few years. Ohio State last season, Michigan the year before that, Georgia back-to-back years prior to that. Those teams all won national titles, and they all had great defensive line play, particularly on the interior. If Notre Dame is serious about winning a national championship in 2026, they need to add at least 2 quality starters at the position, because I like Hughes and other guys like Mukam and Sevillano and Mullins. They could take a big step forward next season, but you can't count on that happening. You can't look at that as a guarantee. Would it be great if they did, because then you have even more options at your disposal there? That would be great. But Notre Dame can't afford to hope and wait. They need to go out, take action, and add guys in the transfer portal. Like I said, I think they need 2, maybe even 3. Mateen Ibarogba, the player from Wake Forest, is a name that has sort of been thrown around there. He would kind of fit the mold, right? Because Notre Dame likes to basically poach the best players in the ACC. As soon as Ibarogba put his name in the transfer portal, he became one of the most highly coveted players at any position, but specifically defensive tackle. At this point in time, I don't expect Notre Dame to land him because I think he is going to warrant a ton of money and probably way more than what he's worth. So if Notre Dame does not have as high of an evaluation on him, then they're probably not going to pay him that money and then work to add 2 solid options that fit their realm. And other than that, I mean, Devin Tompkins from USC is a name, but I think Oregon is the leader for him currently. So outside of those 2 guys, I don't know what other players Notre Dame is going after at defensive tackle, but that's okay because going into the start of the transfer portal last year, nobody was talking about Jared Dawson. Nobody was talking about Elijah Hughes. And those 2 guys were nice pickups for Notre Dame, so I expect them to add a few of those guys to the position here in the coming weeks. All right, the second biggest need for Notre Dame in the transfer portal, I believe, is wide receiver. They need at least 1, potentially 2, but definitely 1 big-time difference maker because their best wide receiver last year, Malachi Fields, is out of eligibility. The Goograt, Will Pauling, is also out of eligibility. So Notre Dame does bring back a lot of talented players like Jordan Faison, Jane Greathouse. They also bring back K.K. Smith, Micah Gilbert, Cam Williams, Logan Saldate, Elijah Burris, and then other guys like Jerome Bettis Jr., and Scrap Richardson. And they're also bringing in 5 true freshmen, Kadon Finley, Bubba Frazier, Braden Robinson, Devin Fitzgerald, and Dylan Faison. So they have a lot of guys in that room, but who can you truly count on to contribute in a big way on a team with championship aspirations next year? So far, just Jordan Faison and hopefully Jane Greathouse after one of the weirdest seasons I can remember for a Notre Dame player in some time in 2025. Notre Dame is going to have one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football next season in C.J. Carr. They need a big-time difference maker, a playmaker, a matchup nightmare as their number 1 wide receiver next year for Carr to throw the ball to. Notre Dame is drastically improved at the wide receiver position in recent years. Just think back to that Duke game in 2023 when Notre Dame barely had any able bodies to go out there and play wide receiver, and Sam Hartman came over from Wake Forest with, over $1 million in NIL money, and we're thinking he is going to be the quarterback that takes his team over the hump. But unfortunately, he only had true freshmen to throw to, and Tobias Merriweather, who didn't necessarily give 110% effort on every single play. So the work that has been done to go from that just 2 seasons ago to what they had this past season is impressive. I think Jordan Faison is great in his role. He led the team in receptions and receiving yards. So I expect big things for him next year. I also expect a big bounce back year for Jaden Greathouse as well. But other than that, it's a ton of unproven talent. And without Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price at running back next season, Notre Dame is going to lean much more heavily on the passing game next season. And to be an elite team, you have to have elite players at the skill positions that put fear in opposing defenses. They can wreck game plans, just like Love and Price did this past season. And honestly, Malachi Fields did that as well, because when they threw the ball up to him, he would go out there and make a play. He made some spectacular catches like that incredible one-handed grab against Pittsburgh, and then he also had that touchdown catch where he mossed that guy. They honestly should have thrown it to him more, but right now, without Fields, they need to add someone like him, and I believe they're going to do that. The number 1 target at the position, and maybe the number 1 target in the entire portal for Notre Dame, is Nick Marsh, the wide receiver from Michigan State, who is going to be going into his junior season next year. He put up big numbers at Michigan State despite the fact that they did not really have a high-functioning offense. So if Notre Dame was able to land Nick Marsh, they would probably be set at the position. They probably would not need to add a second wide receiver because that would give them a front line of Marsh, Faison, and Greathouse, and that would be a really, really strong trio. And then you have young emerging guys, or not young like K.K. Smith. He's older, but he's still emerging. He was coming on at the end of last season. He could end up having a role. Then you give time for Micah Gilbert, Elijah Burris, Logan Saldate. Those guys could take a big leap and be great options for Notre Dame, but they wouldn't be your primary options, and that is where you need to be in order to be an elite team. So they're going all in on Nick Marsh right now. He's 6'3", 205, is extremely fast. I think he's even better than Malachi Fields. He's not as big, but he is faster, and he is a terror with the ball in his hand. So if they're able to land him, that would be a absolute home run at the position and really in the entire transfer portal. But right now, It is an absolute dogfight between LSU and Notre Dame for Nick Marsh's services. And to be honest with you, it's not really a great position to be in when you're fighting with LSU over a wide receiver, because LSU is wide receiver U, but Nick Marsh and CJ Carr have the same agent. He's also from Michigan, much like CJ Carr, so they have a good relationship. I'm hopeful that Nick Marsh will decide to come to Notre Dame so he can catch passes from CJ Carr, but both Notre Dame and LSU feel confident they're going to land him, so it's going to be very interesting to see where he ends up in the coming days. Outside of Marsh, the only name that I can really think of right now is Reed Harris, the boundary receiver from Boston College, who put his name in the transfer portal. He didn't have a great game against Notre Dame, but he did have a touchdown against Leonard Moore. So that says something, right? So obviously they want to land Marsh. If they're not able to land him, they're going to probably add a player like Reed Harris or somewhere along that. But you never know, man. No one was talking about Will Pauling at the start of last year's portal window, and then he ended up being a captain and a big-time contributor for the Irish. Okay, the third biggest need for Notre Dame in the transfer portal, it's place kicker. They lost Noah Burnett, and they lost Marcello Diamide to the transfer portal. The only person coming back is Eric Schmidt. So why is this a need? I mean, do I really have to explain it? Like, Notre Dame last made a field goal on October 11th against NC State. They did not make a single field goal during the second half of the season. By the time Notre Dame opens up the season against Wisconsin next season, they will have gone 330 days without making a field goal. That is absurd. It's embarrassing. It's ridiculous. It's unfathomable. You name it. If the Irish had actually made the playoff, who knows how much their lack of a competent kicking game would have cost them. But it wasn't just field goals, too. They kicked several balls out of bounds on kickoffs, which should never happen, and that was mostly Eric Schmidt back there. And I'm not putting all of the blame for Notre Dame's kicking woes on Eric Schmidt, especially considering the staff wanted to redshirt him this past season, but he's clearly a bit of a head case. He was very nervous every time he went out there to kick a field goal or even an extra point. Even when he was kicking extra points, they wouldn't go straight through the uprights. So Notre Dame cannot afford to go into next season with a kicker who has never made a field goal. It just can't happen. And at this point in time, I don't know who they're looking at in the transfer portal, but they've got to add someone. They've got to add someone who has experience and who has actually shown some consistency over the years at that position. It doesn't matter where you go. I think Oklahoma found their kicker at UTSA, and then that guy ended up winning the Lou Groza Award. So there's no excuse. Notre Dame absolutely has to add a competent place kicker going into 2026. All right, those are the positions Notre Dame cannot afford to miss on. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at a few spots where the Irish are already in pretty good shape, but a smart portal addition or two could raise the ceiling for the entire team. That's next. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first watch or listen of the day, and for making Locked On become the #1 sports podcast network. If you have not already, make sure you check out our brand new Everydayer Club. You'll get access to an ad-free audio feed of Locked On Irish. Same show, same schedule, just no ads. And it works on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you use. If you listen every day, it's a really easy upgrade. Go to lockedonirish.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the game tips off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited-time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. When you open the FanDuel app during Happy Hour, it always brings something new, from boosts to bonuses and surprises. It is easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. And the timing is perfect. It's right before the games and right before the weekend starts. It adds extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour, only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On Irish. Today, we are breaking down Notre Dame's biggest needs in the transfer portal, which opens up here on Friday. And next up, we have got the good to great tier, where Notre Dame is already in a solid position, but if they add one, maybe two guys, they could really take that position to the next level. And to me, the next biggest need for Notre Dame is at defensive end. They lose Jordan Botelho. He's out of eligibility, as is Junior Tuihalamaka. And then on Tuesday, Josh Burnham entered his name in the transfer portal. So now, defensive end really moved up for me after Burnham's departure. This is something that had been a possibility for weeks, but then he made it official on Tuesday. I think the issue here is that Burnham wanted to be an every down defensive end, but Notre Dame is going to bring back Boubacar Traore and Bryce Young. This past season, Burnham really came on at the end of the year, like especially that month of November. It really all started against Boston College, but he had been dealing with injuries at the beginning of the season and just wasn't really seeing a whole lot of playing time. He was out there on a lot of special teams units, but not really on defense. So I think that plays a part in it as well. He only has one more season left of eligibility, so he's going to use that elsewhere, and he's probably going to go to a place where he is on the field 95% of the time. But at Notre Dame, that just wasn't going to happen because they bring back Traore, they bring back Bryce Young. Logan Thomas is going to be entering his third season with Notre Dame. He's looking to take a big step next year. Dominic Hulick is in the mix as well. And then they're bringing in two highly touted freshmen in Rodney Dunham and Ebenezer Iwatade. Would Notre Dame have loved to bring back Josh Burnham? Absolutely. He would have been a great piece. He would have rotated. He might have even started over Bryce Young. We don't really know. But ultimately, this is just sort of common attrition that happens in the modern age of college football where it's really hard to hoard talent as backups. And I think that was the case with Josh Burnham. So now this is a situation where Notre Dame is going to lose 3 of its 5 best defensive ends from last season, although they brought back the most important one in Boubacar Traore. So this isn't a position of weakness. And if you're listening to this show before the start of 2025, you know that I've been extremely high on Bryce Young. I thought he would be the breakout player for the Irish in 2025, and it just didn't happen that way. He was still a good piece, but when you consider the expectations I had for him, he didn't live up to those. But hey, maybe he could live up to those this next season. It looked like he put on a lot of weight to really bulk up and play that strong side end position. So maybe as a junior, he'll be a little bit more comfortable carrying that weight, and then he'll really take off. If that happens, the loss of Burnham won't be felt as much, but still, Notre Dame could add a player to replace Burnham. I mentioned Logan Thomas. This is a critical year for him. He's been good on special teams, but he hasn't really shown that elite pass rushing ability the staff thought he possesses. Now, granted, he has been dealing with injuries as well, but now he has a great opportunity going into next season, but they should still look to add a grad transfer because you don't want to be counting on Thomas or Hulick or these true freshmen because they might be able to contribute in spurts, but you don't know if you're going to be able to count on them from like a down-to-down basis if one of those frontline guys ends up getting hurt. As for potential portal targets, they're going to be looking at Chaz Coleman from Penn State, but so is everyone else in college football. He only played one season with the Nittany Lions and flashed when he was out there, so he is going to be very highly coveted. He's going to demand a big payday, and right now it seems like all signs point to Chaz Coleman ending up in Columbus, Ohio. It's not a huge surprise. Coleman is from Ohio, so if he ends up with Ohio State, that would make the most sense. But another player from Ohio that Notre Dame should be looking at is Adam Trick, who actually played for the Miami Redhawks. He's a grad transfer, and if you are sort of scoffing at the idea of Notre Dame adding a player from the group of 5 at defensive end, I'm just telling you, man, Trick is a damn good player. Last season, he had 66 quarterback pressures, 8.5 sacks, 12.5 tackles for loss. So this is a good player. He also went to the same high school as Marcus Freeman, Wayne High School in Dayton, Ohio. So Notre Dame should look after him pretty hard. I haven't heard anything specific as to whether or not he's actually going to come to Notre Dame, but to me, this seems like an obvious fit for Notre Dame and a great addition for depth. Would he start? No, but I think he'd be a very valuable backup for the Irish next season. Next up, tight end. Notre Dame loses Eli Raridon and Kevin Bauman, remember him, and they bring back Cooper Flanagan, Ty Washington, Jack Larson, and James Flanagan. And then, of course, they're bringing in 2 true freshmen, Ian Premer, the 5-star, and Preston Frizzell, sort of the underrated recruit that could have a really bright future at Notre Dame. So they have 6 scholarship players going into next season as we sit here today. Maybe Larson ends up entering the transfer portal just because he hasn't really been in the mix, but Cooper Flanagan being back next year is huge. He was sorely missed this past season. He would have been a great tight end too to go along with Eli Raridon, but because they didn't have him, Eli Raridon had to carry the bulk of the load, and Notre Dame did not run 12 personnel nearly as much because, to be honest, Ty Washington was average at best this past season. I understand he was dealing with a wrist injury at the start of the year, but he didn't really produce a whole lot for the Irish, although he did end up scoring a touchdown against Navy. So Ty Washington got a touchdown for Notre Dame, but not Eli Raridon. Maybe Jack Larson sticks around and he takes a big step forward, but considering he just has not really been a part of the plans, I don't really expect that to change. And I was personally very high on James Flanagan going into the year, but he barely saw the field. He redshirted So I'm not really sure you can count on him to go from not playing at all to being a key contributor as a sophomore. Again, I still have high expectations for James Flanagan's career at Notre Dame. I just don't know how much you can count on him next season. And I think Premer is going to be fantastic. Same with Preston Frizzell, but it's pretty clear it's tough to get on the field as a true freshman playing tight end. So Notre Dame has a couple options out there. I think the one that they probably are in the best position with is Brody Foley out of Tulsa. He is a grad transfer, and he put up big-time numbers last year at Tulsa. 37 catches, 528 yards, and 7 touchdowns. He also added 2 rushing touchdowns because Tulsa liked to use him in the Wildcat. He is a beast, 6'6", 220 pounds. He kind of looks like Troy Nicholas, like kind of has that meathead look to him, but you know what? At tight end, I love that. And Foley actually started his career out at Indiana, was on the team in 2024 when they had that breakout season in the first year under Curt Cignetti, but Brody Foley could not really find the field for the Hoosiers. So he took that year at Tulsa, maximized his opportunity, put up some big numbers. Now he's back in the transfer portal. And I think if Notre Dame were to land him, he would be good competition with Cooper Flanagan for that tight end 1 spot. I don't think he's better than Flanagan if Flanagan is fully healthy, but he would be a great number 2. And then you have Ty Washington or James Flanagan, one of those guys. If they emerge, then you have 3 high-quality options because last year, Notre Dame just didn't have enough able bodies at the position, and you cannot go into next year with that same mindset or that same amount of depth in that room. So I think they're really going to look hard at Brody Foley. If they don't get him, maybe Walker Lyons from USC, pretty highly rated recruit. I like him as a player. I'm not even sure if this is an option, but I think if they're not able to get Foley, they should take a look at Walker Lyons. All right, last up in the good to great tier, I've got running back, and I think they only need one. They lose Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Both of them are headed to the NFL. And then Jabron Payne recently entered his name in the transfer portal. So going into next season, you're going to bring back Aeneas Williams, Kedron Young, fresh off an ACL tear, and then Nolan James Jr., who was a true freshman, redshirted this past season. They're going to bring in Javian Osborne and Jonas Walton, 2 very talented recruits, but still they're true freshmen. You don't really know what you're getting until they step on campus. There is a lot of depth in that room, which is nice to have. 5 quality scholarship running backs. But what's most important is having a great 1-2 punch. Aeneas Williams' return is huge. I expect him to have a big-time year next season. Remember, Aeneas Williams is the same player who took reps away from Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price in the college football playoff as a true freshman. I know he didn't see the field on Saturdays much last season because Jaywan Sider only likes to play 2 running backs, and he had the 2 best running backs in the entire country ahead of Williams. But Williams was working hard and getting better behind the scenes, so I think he's going to be huge for the Irish next season as their RB1. But who is RB2? Because I mentioned Kedron Young is coming back from an ACL injury. It's hard to tell how productive he's going to be, especially at the start of next season, right? Because we've seen it before. Some guys return from ACL injuries differently than others. Mitchell Evans, it took him like an entire season to get healthy. But then there's guys like Boubacar Traore who didn't miss a beat, and he started off the 2025 season with a bang against Miami. So I don't know how much you can count on Kedron Young next season, even though I think he has a bright future. The staff is extremely high on Nolan James Jr., but he might need some more time to put on weight because even though they're really high on him, he didn't look all that great when he was out there. Now, granted, most of it was in garbage time. The game was over, but he just looked small. So maybe, best case scenario, Nolan James Jr. has like a Kyron Williams level jump, right? Because Kyron Williams never really played as a true freshman. He got in that game against Louisville back in 2019 and then didn't see the field the rest of the year. But then he worked extremely hard during the offseason, and then he became the Kyron Williams that we all know and love. That's a possibility with Nolan James, and it's also a possibility that Javian Osborne or Jonas Walton compete for playing time. I think Javian Osborne is the more likely one out of the 2. So Notre Dame does have a bunch of solid options. If they don't end up bringing in a running back, it's not like a catastrophe or anything like that. But I do think that there's a lot of talent in the transfer portal. And if you could add someone like a Hollywood Smothers from NC State, a player who I've been calling for since October when I was doing prep for the NC State game, I was watching their highlights and I was like, man, Hollywood Smothers can really go. And then Marcus Freeman talked about him specifically in his press conference leading into that game. So you know the staff is high on him, but is he a realistic option for Notre Dame at this point in time? I don't know. I'm sure the staff did their homework, and if they're able to get Smothers at a pretty decent price, the 1-2 punch with Williams and Smothers would be really, really good going into next season. It wouldn't be Love and Price, but you would have Aeneas Williams as like the every down back, and then you could bring in Hollywood Smothers to be the home run hitter. They're both very good in the passing game as well. We saw that from Aeneas Williams. Hollywood Smothers is really talented when it comes to catching passes out of the backfield as well. So if they're able to land a player of his caliber, then they would have another great running back room heading into next season. If they don't end up landing one, I still think they have a pretty good running back room, and then you just have to hope that Young returns from his injury healthy, or Nolan James Jr. takes a big leap, or one of these true freshmen just really impress everyone right away, and they hit the ground running. All right, we have covered the non-negotiables and the ceiling raisers. Now let's close it out with the safety net positions where Notre Dame should add for depth and insurance. Plus, I'm going to break down which positions don't need any help in the transfer portal. That's coming up next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like college football season, tailgates, packed stadiums, and being right there in the middle of it all. The energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever. But actually getting tickets, that part used to be frustrating with long queues, logins, and prices jumping at checkout. But that's why Game Time gives the advantage back to fans. It is the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. The app is incredibly easy to use. I went from browsing to buying tickets in just minutes. I loved being able to see the view from my seat before buying, so I knew exactly what I was getting. The zone deal stood out. You pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save even more. Knowing prices include all fees up front makes the whole process stress-free. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. We're back here on Locked On Irish talking about Notre Dame's biggest needs in the transfer portal, which opens up on Friday. And to close things out, we have got the safety net tier, and I've got two spots for you. They are not quite as important as adding a couple defensive tackles or a wide receiver one, but it's still very important. Notre Dame has to get a backup quarterback in the transfer portal. They lost their backup, Kenny Minchey, the day after their season ended. He wasted no time announcing his intention to enter the transfer portal. Notre Dame's season ended on December 7th when they got snubbed from the college football playoff and then proceeded to opt out of the bowl game, and Minchey's name was in the portal the very next day. They also lost Tyler Buckner, who is out of eligibility. They also lost Anthony Rizak, the former walk-on, who is entering the transfer portal as well. So going into next season, they'll have CJ Carr, which is great, but then they'll have three freshmen. Blake Hebert, who will be a redshirt freshman, and honestly, it would not shock me if Blake Hebert entered his name at the transfer portal here in the coming days. They'll also have Noah Grubbs, the true freshman who was in the class of 2026, and Teddy Gerard, another true freshman who reclassified from the class of 2027. So they're going to have one of the best quarterbacks in college football, and then three freshmen who have never taken a snap in college. That is not a great place to be. Obviously, you want to have a player like CJ Carr, but you want a little bit of insurance behind him. And right now, Notre Dame doesn't have that. You cannot be one play away from playing Blake Hebert or a developmental quarterback prospect who's going to be a true freshman or another true freshman who should be a senior in high school. Notre Dame has had good luck at quarterback the past 3 seasons. Sam Hartman, Riley Leonard, and CJ Carr did not miss a game each of the past 3 seasons, but that could change, right? You can't count on that happening every single year. So Notre Dame needs to go into the group of 5 level, maybe even the FCS level, to find an experienced quarterback who would just love the experience of being at Notre Dame, being a part of a big-time program, even if they're not going to start or anything like that. But they are truly one play away from being that guy. It is going to be hard to find, but it is not impossible. I brought it up before. Ole Miss did it this past season. They added Trinidad Chambliss from Ferris State. That's Division II. And then they ended up rolling with him the rest of the season because he had his opportunity after Austin Simmons went down, and then he ended up playing really well. Can you count on adding a player of Trinidad Chambliss's caliber? No, but they need someone. So it is very important that Notre Dame goes out there and they find an experienced backup for CJ Carr. And lastly, they should look to add a nickel. They lose Devontae Smith, their starting nickel from last season, and they also lost his primary backup at the start of the year in Carson Hobbs. Then obviously Dallas Golden took over at nickel once the staff decided to bench Carson Hobbs. It's a big reason why he is now in the transfer portal. And there is a chance that they could move Mark Zachary into nickel, but I don't think they're going to do that. Aiden Pouncey and maybe even Joey O'Brien could compete if they don't end up adding a nickel. But I think that right now, Dallas Golden is the presumed starter. I remember having a conversation with Lockdown recruiting insider Brian Smith back when Dallas Golden was a recruit. And Brian said he spoke with Dallas in Florida, and Dallas said he wants to play nickel. You don't really hear a lot of high school prospects say that because it's a very difficult position. You have to be able to cover big tight ends and small, speedy slot receivers in the passing game, but you also have to be able to get your nose in there and make plays in the run game against big running backs right there where there's all kinds of traffic. So it's a really hard position to play. Notre Dame has added a grand transfer nickel the past 3 seasons. They got Thomas Harper from Oklahoma State, Jordan Clark from Arizona State, and then Devontae Smith from Alabama. It is a grown man position because you're asked to do a lot, and Marcus Freeman clearly likes having a grown man play it. I would not consider Dallas Golden a grown man yet. He'll be a true sophomore in 2026, but, he filled in pretty well for Devontae Smith for a true freshman, but I don't know if that's where they want him permanently. I think we're going to find out more in spring practice. Golden could end up being a very, very good player, and if he takes a leap this offseason, he could start at nickel, even if they choose to bring in a player in the transfer portal. But Golden is still pretty green, so they could add some security at that position if they go out there and land someone. Imagine if they add a Jalen Stroman type or a Rod Hurd type, 2 players who ended up not starting for Notre Dame, but they ended up providing valuable depth. That's what Notre Dame should look to add. Right now, I don't know of any potential targets at the position, but I'm sure that Notre Dame is looking around. It's not as big of a need as it has been in past years, but it would be a nice addition to have. So those are all the positions where Notre Dame absolutely has to bring in at least one player, potentially 2, like at defensive tackle, like at wide receiver. They need to add a kicker, defensive end, tight end, running back, as well as a backup quarterback and a nickel. But you know what they don't need to add? I don't think they need to add a linebacker. Right now, there have been no departures announced. We could see some attrition at like the 2nd or 3rd string levels, but it should be a loaded group going into next season because they're going to bring back Drake Bowen, Jane Osbury. I expect Jalen Snead to return for a 5th year. Man Framo is going to be a sophomore. And then they should get Kingston Viliamu Asa back in midseason. That's 5 really good options. So they don't need to go in the transfer portal. I also don't think they're going to add an offensive lineman, even though they lost Billy Strouth and Emil Wagner to the NFL draft. They have recruited really well on the offensive line. And Joe Rudolph has even said he's not going to add guys in the transfer portal. I don't think they need to add a cornerback outside of nickel. Yes, they lost Chance Tucker, but that does not move the needle. They are stacked, and I do expect Christian Gray to be back on the team next season, so they're going to have both their starting cornerbacks, but it would not shock me if one of the freshmen, Kerry Adams or Aiden Pouncey, ended up competing for playing time with Christian Gray because those 2 guys are really, really talented, and even though Christian Gray is going to be a senior next year, we have seen how he can struggle on Saturdays. So Notre Dame doesn't need to look to add in the portal. They can just look at the guys in their room, and they have a ton of really, really talented options. I could say the same thing at safety. Yes, they lost Jadon Blair and Tabron Benny Powell and Ben Minnick, but they're going to bring back their top 3 safeties next season, Adon Schuler, Tay Johnson, and Luke Talich. Plus, you have Ethan Long, who looked really good in that Syracuse game, brought that pick back, but it was negated because of a penalty, but it didn't matter. He ended up adding another pick a few plays later, so that's a pretty strong top 4. And then Joey O'Brien, Aiden Pouncey, they can make a move and compete for playing time as a freshman. So they're set at corner and safety. And lastly, they don't need to add a punter because they already added Jasper Scaife. I don't know if we can really count him as a transfer because he's coming over from Australia, playing in the AFL out there, but he's going to have 4 years of eligibility, not to like Rendell. So they filled that position, but they definitely need a kicker. So there you have it. Those are Notre Dame's biggest needs in the transfer portal. As I see it, they have a ton of returning talent on the roster next season, but if you want to compete for championships in college football, you have to go all in on the transfer portal. And even though Notre Dame is not going to be adding like 20 to 30 players like some teams, they can be selective and they have to land some big-time players to make a title run in 2026. All right, that is going to do it for me today. Thanks as always for making this your first watch or listen of the day. I truly appreciate the support. And if you have not already, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow the show on your favorite podcast platform, like the video, rate and review the podcast. You know the drill. I'm going to be back here tomorrow morning, New Year's Day, with Greg Famung from Irish Sports Daily. We're going to cover a wide range of Notre Dame football topics, so you won't want to miss that. Until then, have a happy New Year, everybody.